Hey everyone, congratulations. You made it back. You're still here. Module number 2. I'm sure you're as excited as I am. All right, so we're going to talk about two different things in this module. First, we're going to take a look at session 2.1, which is going to be about fonts, colors, sales data, etc. And then the next video in session 2.2, we're going to talk about average, styles, etc. So as usual, the videos are not going to be perfect, but we will give it a shot. So first, let's turn to page 66, and let's load up this example and go through it. Okay, so I've opened up the Morning Bean file, and this is what you'll see when we look at um, page 66, except we haven't fixed it up yet like we're going to, and you should see something in the end, like we're going to turn this file into what you see there. So here below we have the sales report by state and by month for each store. And here we have some numbers at the top and sales and so on. So let's take a look. Okay, and if we look at the end result, it's going to look something like this, right? There's a few things that we're going to change, but this is generally the idea. So we basically went from this here unformatted, and applying different rules, we changed it into this. It's a lot easier to read, and there's a lot of data that's highlighted that could potentially help us. So for example, in green, it's showing us the top 10% of sales. The red will show us if we have a loss, and right away, when we just look at the numbers, we could visually see that, as opposed to here, we'd actually have to read what's going on to figure out what exactly we're supposed to be doing, right? Like I would have to go through these numbers to figure out what's the story, and I would have to know that all these were California, for example, in order to see that. So let's take a look at the textbook. Okay, so let's look at a few features. We could have text here that says California, and you'll note that unlike here, we took the text and rotated it. So we could rotate the text in a cell, and it would apply to all of these that we merged. We could merge and combine like we talked about last time. So this whole area for California is one cell, and we did that by selecting all the cells and pressing where it says merge and center, right? You can see it's selected here. If I unselect it, it would make it like that. If I select it, it makes it into one box. Okay, we talked about that in the last module. Now you can click in any box and we could choose the font, right? Just like we would in a program. And we could pick, let's say, Arial Black. And since it doesn't fit in the box anymore, try to make it a little smaller. And we could change the fonts depending on what we're trying to do. And we could even have multiple fonts in the same sheet. Normally, you would use a normal font that's readable because, especially when you're using with numbers, it's very important to be able to read what's going on. Let's change this back to, there we go. Okay, so if we have a text string like this, we're able to edit it using the font box. We could change like bold, underlined, etc. So let's try that. We'll choose this and we can go bold. Or let's try italic and underline. There you go. So that you see where it says 85 Seaside Lane, it now changes. Okay, so we're going to move across the top. The next box we have is the alignment box. So in this box, let's look at this number. We could choose, do we want it to be at the top of the box, the middle, or the bottom? Do we want it to be on the left, the center, or the right? Now, depending on how the box is set up, the text might not move. But in our case, let's try it over here. There we go. Okay, so we could center it, move it up or down. And since there's not a lot of room for the text to move around, it doesn't move much. But with these, it will. You'll notice here that the text is wrapped. So if I unwrap the text, it would just be one long line that gets cut off. If I press wrap text, it will wrap it into the same box. Okay, so let's take a look at the number group. So I'll pick a number. And here in this box, over here we have the number group. which lets you pick number, currency, accounting, short date, long date, time, percentage, fraction, etc. We could also choose currency of various types, percentage, etc. Right? We could also change the number of decimal points. And the other way to do that is if you right-click on it, you go to where it says Format Cells, and this box pops up, and you could choose what kind of number you want to have. So is it going to be just a number? Do we want to have a number without decimal places? If you look in the sample, is it going to be a currency? What format should it display in? This is very important, especially when using dates, because you could choose all these different formats for how the date should show up, right? Like when you type it in, do you want it to just be 3/14, or do you want it to actually say March 14th, 2012? Same thing's true with time. There's a number of options of how we can make it look, time and date, or just time, 24 hours, etc. Percentages, fractions, etc. Right? So in this case, let's pick dollar. So we get the dollar sign showing up there, and you'll notice that it formats it with cents automatically. If we don't want that, we could press this twice and remove the decimal places. Or we could select a bunch of them and go into Format Cells, and let's pick currency, no decimal places. Oh, I just undid the change that I did before. Let's try that again. Like I said, probably not perfect. Okay, so we have a dollar sign, no decimal places. Okay, and now all those get a dollar sign. Okay, so we could do the same thing by just going up here and pressing dollar sign. Or we could go in here and choose here and then choose currency and then do the same thing. Limit to zeros, or we could add them back if we want to add a number of decimal places. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now, you'll notice that the top bar here has different colors. This is called the fill color, and we're going to go into that later. There's all different kinds of backgrounds we could add to a cell to differentiate it. We talked about the comma style separator, so you'll notice that we can change, do we put the comma there or not? Let's take a look in here. So if we go in here under Format Cells, if we choose the number to General, then there's no format. Or if we go number, we could uncheck the comma separator and it will give us the number without the comma, right? After every 1,000 numbers. So if we press OK, it will have the comma. If we go to Format Cells, we change it to number, then no comma. And we could turn that number into a currency, for example, or like that. Okay? So that is the number box. Okay, so we talked about the font box over here and all the different things that we can add. We'll just go through a couple more of them. I'll make a new sheet. So let's say I have a cell. I'll put in the number 500. And when I click on it, it tells me that I'm using this font at this size. I could also do things like bold, italic, underline, double underline, etc. Okay. I could also take that box and click here and make a border. So I could do thick borders, thin borders, etc. Okay, so let's do thick borders for a second. So now I have a black box drawn around my number. And if I go into here, I can see that this is how it actually prints. So I'm not going to see any of this gray stuff here, but I will see the black box. Okay, and that's useful if I want to have like numbers on the side that I want to separate. That could be very helpful. I could also right-click on the box and go to where it says Format Cells and go into the Font tab. And here I have a list of fonts, the style, the size, color, the effect, and I could pick things like strike through, etc. Okay? Okay, so I don't know, this is what I changed. So in the example, you could take a look at it. In their example, they typed in morning bean. And then I think they used Calibri Light. Let's see if we have that. There we go. And they picked size 26. And there we go, right? And then, we could press bold and bold it. And just by following the instructions on page 69, page 70, we could start to make a fancy header for our sheet, which would take something that looks like this and turn it into, where did that guy go? Here we go. And turn it into this, but even nicer because it will update the graphic. That didn't work. But yeah, that's the idea. And we could format it with a particular font, like we could see in the example. Okay, so let's keep on going. Here on page 71, we could also add colors to the backgrounds. We could go Format Cells and Fill, and then pick a color. This is the color that will show up in the background. We could also add a pattern, for example, if we want to add additional. Okay, so we could make cross-hatching like that. Let's try. There we go. Oh, it got rid of our second line. Let's go back. Try just that. There we go. Okay, so that runs us through page 72. By following the step-by-step directions, you should be able to replicate the exact morning colors that they have. We could also use the tools up here to fill the square and to change the font color. Okay. So we talked about fill colors on page 73, 74. And next, we're going to talk about background image. How exciting. Okay, so we click on the page layout tab up at the top, and we click on background. So under background, we can either pick a file, and if you follow the directions on page 74, 75, you'll see what they did. I am particularly hungry, so I'm just going to type in pizza, and it will come up with a number of files. It's important to understand what these things are, by the way. Like Creative Commons will let you redistribute the file, whereas other kinds won't. You can also use like Google Image Search, but this happens to be built in. So I'm going to pick that, press OK, and it adds that as the background of my file. You'll note, however, that putting in a gigantic background like this, probably not the best idea because it's very difficult to see my numbers now, right? So that's probably not the greatest idea for that kind of background, but a background with a logo or with a textured pattern like I have in our sheet, that could potentially be a good idea. Let's try that. See if we can find something that's not too overwhelming. How about this? Okay, kind of still overwhelming, but you get the idea. Okay, that's how we add in a background. Okay, so for the next section, in order to understand exactly what to do, you have to follow along from page 75 to page 78 and follow the steps, page 79, exactly the way that it says it in the book, right? Like you basically need to go through each step to use the numbers that are already in the sheet. But I'm going to show you the basic idea, and then you can extrapolate it from there while you're doing the example, okay? So let's look at a new sheet, and let's put in a group of numbers. Okay, so let's take a look at some example numbers. So this is, as we talked about, putting together numbers, adding them together with sum. So I'm making a pizza party. I'm having 5 friends over, and I want to know how many pizza slices do I have to get in total. So I'm going to type in equals sum, bracket, grab those numbers, close bracket, and hit enter, and I need 21 slices. Okay, and let's do some quick math. I could also go back here and press auto sum like we learned about last time and hit enter, and that would give us the same numbers just because they're aligned, right? Now we know that I need 21 slices, but how many pizzas is that? Let's figure it out. So I'm going to grab the 21 and divide it by 8, and it's going to say I need 2 and just over a half pizzas. But since they don't sell 2.65, I'll either have to order 2 or more, right? And I could easily figure that out, right? I could do something like equals 3 times 8, and I would get 24, and I could add on to that minus 21, and I'll have 3 leftover slices. Okay, now this is if I order 3 pizzas. Now, why am I doing it like this in steps? Because if I change these instead of being numbers and I put in variables, then I'll be able to change these numbers and all the numbers will change, right? So let's say Jim now tells me he wants 3 slices. Then you see the numbers here change. I now need 22. I need 2.75 pizzas. And then I would change this to match the numbers up here in order to make it work. So instead of putting in 21, I could grab the number of slices, and then it would tell me I have 2 left over. Whereas if Meg tells me now she only wants 2, the numbers change again, right? So this is a really quick example, and it sort of illustrates the concepts at the top of page 76 in terms of addition, division, etc. Okay? So the only other thing that I want to point out is that if you look at the example at the bottom of page 76, we talk about ranges. So again, for the total number of slices, you'll see I have equals sum. And then in the brackets, I have B3 to B8. So that's going to go from B3, B4, B5, B6, B7, B8. It'll grab all of these right here. Now, because I used AutoSum, it also grabbed this blank one here, which I may not want to do. But the interesting thing is that if I move these like we did last time, I'm going to put them over here. And instead of having B8, I'll change this to B20. You'll notice that the box increases in size, right? And that means that it's calculating all of these spaces as well, even though they're zeros, it doesn't change anything. But then if somebody new comes along, so my buddy Pete, and he says, hey, I want 30 slices, it will automatically change the calculations, right? And we can keep on doing that for a list that we want to continuously add to. Okay, so let's look at, keep on going through the example. Okay, and as it is right now, this should give you all the tools you need to get through the example to page 79. All right, so we've gone through the key examples, which is AutoSum, using sum, etc. And let's take a look at formatting numbers on page 79. We already went through some of that with the number box up here, as well as under format cells, when we could choose from the different styles and pick the various options, like we could see on page 80 and 81. Oh, a very important note. You may notice, and this is on the top of page 81, so if you have a long number like this, but sometimes it shows up as all hashes. And if that happens, let's try, yeah, there we go. So if it's formatted as a number and not just general, right, you'll notice that the numbers show up like hashes like this. That just means that there's more data than can be shown, more digits that can be shown in the cell. So if you just expand a little bit, you'll see it. Okay, so that's very important because sometimes you see a sheet that has a whole bunch of those hash marks, and in order to figure out what's going on, you just have to expand the column a little bit or shrink the font or whatever. Take down the number of decimal point places in order to make that work. Okay? So we covered increasing and decreasing decimal places that we see up here. And we talked about the comma style. So there's the comma style over here for multiple digit numbers, as well as we talked about if you go into format cells under number, you could use a 1,000 place separator. We'll add the comma, and we could choose the number of decimal places, like you could see in the example up there. Okay, we're also able to take numbers and add a percentage, right? So let's do a little bit of quick math and figure out what percentage. We'll figure out a percentage. Okay, so as inevitably happens, somebody says, how much is my share of the bill? What percentage of the pizza did I eat? So we know that we bought 3 pizzas approximately, and we could figure out the money later, but the idea of what I'm trying to show you is just about the percentages. So let's figure that out. I type in equals, telling Excel I'm about to start a formula, and I grab the number of slices that Jim had, which is 3, divided by the total number of slices. I hit enter, and it will tell me 15%. Now, if it doesn't show 15% for you, you might have it turned on to general, and it will show you 0.15. And you can press the percentage button, Or you could go down here and press percentage. There we go. Or you could right click and go to Format Cells and choose percentage and choose the number of decimal places. I'm going to pick 0 decimals, and it'll give me a number like this. Okay, then we'll do that for all the rest of them. Okay, so we took everybody's number of slices divided by the number of slices overall. We could do an auto sum just to check everything equals up to 100%. It does. And it's covered in a future module, but we could also grab the numbers and insert a super quick chart. And because we're talking about pizza, obviously the pie chart would be the best option. Okay, so it would show you who used it. And we're going to talk about this later again, so don't worry about it right now, but it's a good idea to put data labels so we can find out what exactly we're talking about. Okay, so this will help us figure out how to split the bill, and we could do the same thing with the money instead of the number of slices. That would help too. Okay, let's keep on rocking. Okay, so we'll just briefly talk about dates, like we could see at the bottom of page 83. So let's try May 1st, 2001. Okay, now if it changes the format to look like this, you'll notice that it says 1 May 01 here, and up here it will say 5/1/2001. That means that it actually formatted as a date and we're good to go. Okay, if I go to Format Cells, it will say Custom right now, like day, month, year, but I could change it to date, and I could pick a particular date, and it will again show me this because it got cut off. Let's do Merchant Center, and here I have Tuesday, May 1st, 2001, which it will tell me, by the way, what day of the week it is, right? And we could keep on doing that. Let's drag down a little bit. Okay, this when I drag down, it just copies them in sequence. So it will tell me May 1st, May 2nd, May 3rd, etc. But you'll notice that if I go up here, the numbers for the dates are like that. If you type in a number and it doesn't format it properly, then you know that Excel didn't store it as a date, it just stored it as text, and that could be a problem when we're trying to do calculations based on dates. Like, for example, measuring the amount of time in between two dates, or finding out how old you are based on a date, or how many days you've been in the program, or which sales date falls into a fiscal year. All those things have to do with dates, which can look a variety of ways, right? Like, so I could change the appearance of these to something else, like this, but they're still formatted as dates the same way. So it doesn't matter how they display, it really depends on how we format them to look. Okay, so now we talked about alignment, word wrap, Merchant Center, and so on, and that's all these boxes, and that is on page 84. Okay, we talked about indenting cell content, which you could do right over here. And we also talked about adding borders and cells, which is here. We did that earlier. Right, so depending on how we set it up, we can add borders and so on. This one is like in the corner, and I merged the cells, so it'll look a little weird. But let's do an example here. And right, so I'm going to combine these two boxes together, grab these, put it in a heavy box like this, and then I'll take all these numbers and center them. I don't know what that means, but you get the idea, right? I could put maybe people's names, or I could use this as a menu, or I don't know. Okay, let's keep on going. On page 86, you'll notice that some numbers that, let's say, look like this, will only have top and bottom, not the whole box like I have here. And to do that, you just go into your borders and press top border, and then go in and press bottom border. Okay, and it'll make the two borders just like you see on page 86 in figure 2.15. We could also do the exact same thing if I go into, let's try that over here. If I go into Format Cells, and I go into where it says border, this box shows me where the borders are, so I could turn them off like this, and I could choose different types of borders and put those in, right? I could also do outline, inside, outside, and this will preset to automatically do the whole box, and this will do everything, right? Depending on what look I'm going for. So you'll see that this puts dashes here. And I could change this up by going back into my Format Cells and just choosing which look I'm looking for. So I could have inside and outside, I could have none, change double line, etc. There's a lot of flexibility on how you want these to appear, but what we're trying to do is what we see similar on page 86. And what we're going to try to do is format the example that we've been going through, which is this one, right, to try to make it look like this one. That's basically the idea, right? So we add in some things so we could see it a little better, even though we haven't covered every single thing that we're going to be talking about. So as we've talked about already, we have merging cells, just like I did here for scores. And we could see that on page 87, right? So like again, what I did is I typed score into one box, but really I want this to represent 3 columns. So I'm going to highlight all 3 and press where it says merge and center. Okay, this could be a good way to format a box or something like that. The problem is that sometimes I need to evaluate all the numbers in each column, and I can't do that if I have one cell that goes across 3 columns. So because I'm still hungry, let's look at a menu option similar to what we see on page 88, 89 with rotating text. So I'm going to have my 3 menu options, so my 3 menu sections. And I'm just going to grab pizza, drag down, and press where it says merge and center. And then I'm going to click on the rotate text button and press where it says rotate text up. So this is exactly what I have over here where it says California, like you could see here on the side. Okay, like this. And we're going to do that on our menu by just grabbing the cells, merging them together, and then rotating them up. So let's merge and center and rotate them upwards, like so. Okay, and then in here we could format them, change the font, etc. I could press the font up box a few times. Let's see what font I ended up with, 22. So let's make everything 22. And this creates a logical way for me to now make my pizza options without adding too much, taking up too much space on the sheet. Okay, so I'm going to add another line, and we could put in headers here. So I could say, like, let's say item price. Okay, so I added in some quick options. And like we talked about on page 90, we've looked at this a few times already. If I right-click and go to Format, I could then go to Font. And this is a preview of what my font/color is going to look like. And I could change that. And let's make it blue background, or a light blue background. There we go. Okay, kind of difficult to read, but you get the idea. Let's try this as black. Okay, I like it. Okay, but by going through here, we could choose different fonts. It's important to remember that if you're sharing the sheet with other people and you have some weird fonts that you downloaded, they may not properly work on somebody else's computer if they don't have those. So it's a good idea to use like the more common fonts, because then you're able to share those with other people if you are trying to send them to somebody else's computer. Let's find this. There we go. Wow, this menu is really coming along. Okay, I'll try this again. I'll go into Format Cells. Let's try Fill, and we'll grab light blue. No, they're not the same color. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, so I picked the light blue, pressed OK, and it's coming along. Okay, so let's keep on going. Okay, and let's take a look at their example. So let's say I want to color the entire top row a particular color. I could just click on where it says 1, the little arrow comes up, and it will select the entire row. I could do the same thing with a column. So I'll pick the row, and we just have to grab a font color. So in this case, I'm going to make it light gray. And the fill color, the background color, I'm going to make it something dark so we can see what's going on. There we go. Okay, so that's similar to the example that you could see in figure 2-20, where we set the color for the column, and we also set the color for the row. All right? Maybe in this particular case, we want something that has a lighter font, so we're able to see the text more clearly. So I put it in white, and we can see it like that. Again, like pretty much everything that we're able to do in here, we could also go into the other option, and you'll see in general that as we go through Excel, there's usually multiple ways to do the same thing. So don't be too caught up if you know a different technique that works just as well. They usually accomplish the same kind of thing. And that is the end of Module 2.1. So the next video will go through Module 2, and we'll look at some of those examples. You could turn this off now if you want, and move on to the next one. I'm just going to do a super brief video. We're going to talk super brief thing. We're going to talk a little more about pricing because it matches the example that we were talking about in the workbook. So let's say these are my extra options. Like we talked about in the first module, now that I have these values, and you'll notice that here I just use a formula to make random numbers, but I could just as easily type these in. You'll see the funny thing is that they change automatically as I go through because I set them to auto update. But okay, so these are actual numbers now. So it just says 2, and I formatted it as dollars, right? Then we would want to ask people like, what is the quantity? How many do you want to order? And then we could come up with the total. So you should know how to do this by now. If you don't, that's okay. We'll go through a brief thing of just getting used to working with numbers and putting a little bit of simple math to figure it out. Okay, so let's go over here and we'll make an order sheet. Okay, and this is going to be similar to the example we're working with. So I'm going to merge and center and put this in a box, and we'll say name, person puts in their name, and we could even make this merge and center as well, right? So it will center within that box. Okay, so here we'll just type in pizza, and we say what toppings does he want. Now here's the cool thing. If we press equals, we could copy from another box without necessarily retyping it. Okay, so let's type in equals pepperoni, B2, and it will just bring over whatever is in B2. It will share that with us. Okay, and we could also do the same thing for the price. So I'm going to press equals price, hit enter. Okay, now theoretically I could do that for all 3 boxes automatically, but we're trying to break it down step by step. And let's pick one more. Let's pick onions, and the price of onions is $2. Okay, now I want to have my subtotal, so I can press equals sum, put in the brackets, and the tooltip tells us we need multiple numbers, right, or a range. So I'm going to grab the range, close it, and hit enter. Okay, so it tells me so far my subtotal is $4. We could put in tax. Now I could do the calculation just like this, or I could have a separate box that will say tax rate. All right, let's try that. Now tax rate, I'm going to set this to be 7.5%. Okay, and I'll show you why we're doing this because we could always change the tax rate later. So I'm going to press equals. We'll grab this times. Okay, so what I did is I changed my tax rate to be a decimal point. So this is 7.5% equivalent. So I put in my subtotal, which is the sum of these numbers. I added tax by multiplying the subtotal by the tax rate. And then total, I added these 2 numbers together. Now, if the tax rate changes, let's say now it's 15%, I could type in 0.15, and the calculation automatically updates. As well as, like we saw before, I could change the prices or change things, and they will all automatically calculate by itself. Okay, so that does it for Module 2.1, and next we'll go into Module 2.2.